Alright, Unit 5 starts off with Chapter 12 and 13. It's going to be about GDP, which is Gross Domestic Product, the business cycle, inflation, and unemployment. So we're actually going to start off with unemployment. Unemployment levels change from year to year. This is just going to give you examples of really bad unemployment. Like 2007 is about 5%. It's usually where we're about at. And then the Great Recession, which is what we had just come out of, or in the process of coming out of, topped out about 9.9, 10% in June 2009. Well, like the Great Depression topped out at over 25%. This is actually, it goes a little bit over 25%. I think the highest it hit was 26. In 33, right after Roosevelt did the New Deal. So that gives you kind of a reference point of what unemployment is kind of where it's supposed to be. Usually, unemployment is about 3 to 5% of the working population. But we'll talk about what constitutes an unemployed person in a second here. So, are you really unemployed? And so, to be part of that 5% that's unemployed, you have to meet certain criteria by the U.S. government. For instance, you can't get unemployment checks if you don't meet these criteria. So 1, you have to actively be looking for work within the past week. 2, you have to currently be available to work. You can't be in a full body cast, totally unable to do anything. You can't be in a coma and be considered unemployed. Waiting to be called back. That also makes you unemployed. Or waiting to report to a job within 30 days. So if you're about to start working, you're still unemployed. Secular unemployment is based off of supply and demand. It varies with the business cycle. And so if demand for a product goes down, demand for labor goes down, then unemployment rises. This just changes with what people are wanting to buy and what they're willing to buy with their money. And so, there's not a lot of people working to make VHS tapes anymore because everybody buys DVDs or Blu-ray. Frictional unemployment is like people who are temporarily unemployed. So if you're like working a job in college down in like Macomb, Illinois, and you work a part-time job, well, you're employed. But if you graduate and move back home, you quit your job, then you're unemployed because you just moved back home. So that's frictional unemployment. Structural unemployment. This is where businesses are looking for people, but there aren't people with the skills and abilities that they need to do the job. Okay? Or there are people who have who are willing to work, but they don't have the education or the training to do a particular job, so they can't be hired for it. That's structural unemployment. Seasonal unemployment are like people who get laid off at certain times of the year. So Six Flags workers don't work in the winter. My cousin works construction. He works on an oil pipeline, and he gets laid off every winter. He gets laid off for like 6 months. So now moving from unemployment, we're going to talk about GDP. GDP is kind of the other, if we're going to look at measuring the economy, like how well is our economy doing, we're going to look at unemployment. Okay, is it high or low? Then we're going to look at GDP, and then finally inflation. GDP is going to stand for a gross domestic product, and it is the total value of all goods and services produced within a year inside the U.S. per year in the United States. So everything we make, every penny we earn as a nation, that's the gross domestic product. Gross national product is the total value of all things produced by U.S. citizens, no matter where in the world they live. Okay? If I go over to France and start teaching English or whatever, then I am not part of the money I make there is not part of the gross domestic product, but it is part of the gross national product. The Consumer Price Index, this is the average amount of the average price that households pay for goods and services. And so if you increase the price of milk and bread and food and insurance and things like that, all of a sudden the Consumer Price Index will go up. If Consumer Price Index goes up, that is a good measure or a good sign of inflation. Inflation is bad. Okay? Inflation is bad. Deflation is bad. We want money to be stable. Oh, I'll talk about what inflation means in a few minutes. But let's finish talking about GDP first. There's two major uses for GDP. First, it measures the size of an economy. And two, it gauges the standard of living for people in the United States. So the higher the GDP, the more money the average person is making in the U.S., the higher the standard of living in the country. Okay? So the countries with the highest GDPs have the best standard of living and the best living conditions. Okay? You don't have to, you're not going to be poisoned by unsanitary well water or from drinking out of a river or anything like that, because we have purified water supplied to almost every citizen in the country. So top 4 countries with GDP: US, China, Japan, and Germany. This is a graph of worldwide GDP in 2008. European Union's on top, but they don't really count because it's not just a country, it's a bunch of countries put together, which is cheating. Without cheating, the US wins, naturally. Japan is pretty far behind, but Japan still has, for such a tiny country, has a massive economy. The darker colors on this map are the countries with the higher GDPs. So the darker the country, the higher the GDP, which means we can figure out that they have higher standards of living. So in the United States is really dark, China's really dark, Brazil's pretty dark, but then you get lighter colors in South America, Central America, Africa, places in the Middle East have a little bit lighter colors. So you can figure they have lower GDPs and lower standards of living. When we calculate GDP, we do not include illegal goods. Anything bought with cash illegally is not computed in because there's no records of it. Any payment without record is not recorded, which means if you babysit for $10 an hour for 3 hours and you get paid in cash, you get $30 that doesn't go into the GDP. Sale of used goods. So if I have a used car and I sell it to a friend of mine and he gives me a check and I don't have tax on it, then that doesn't compute into the GDP. And the final thing is stock market trades and government payments. Buying ownership of something doesn't count as a good or service, and getting welfare does not count as a good or service. What's the equation for calculating GDP? You have consumption plus investment plus government spending plus parentheses exports minus our imports. So GDP equals C plus I plus GS plus parentheses export minus imports, end parentheses. The higher the GDP, the better. Here's just an example. Country A's consumption is 12 million, imports are 500,000, investments are 2.7 million, and exports are 1 million. Government expenditures are 7 million. So we have our consumption is 12 million, plus our investments are 2.7 million, plus our government expenditures, which is 7 million, plus exports, which is 1 million, minus our imports, which is 500,000, gives us $22.2 million. Here's another example. You guys can try to figure this out on your own. I'll give you, you can either pause the video and figure it out on your own before the answer pops up, or you can, I'll give you like 15 seconds from now. It's close enough, 15 seconds at any time. 27.9 million. So we have consumption is 15 million plus investments, which are 1.2 million, plus government expenditures, which is 12 million, plus exports, 500,000, minus your imports, which are 800,000, equals 27.9 million. Here's the same problem here. I'll give you a few seconds and or pause it. So we have our consumption at 9 million, our investments are at 3.6 million, government expenditures at 9, plus our exports, which are 350,000, minus our imports, which are 300,000, equals 21.65 million. That's where we're going to end today. We're going to be talking about inflation, which is another measure of how well an economy is doing, in the next video.